Okay, we are starting Masechet Eruvin, Daf Gimel. We're going to start on Daf Bet all the way on the bottom. So just
You
to
mean you mean Pesachim? You said
Pesachim.
Eruvin.
Thank you. Masechet Pesachim, Daf Gimel. So let's just review a little bit about what we said yesterday. So we saw the Mishnah that says Or le'arba'a asad bodkin et hachametz le'or haner. Now we all know we do b'dikat chametz in the beginning of the night of the 14th, not during the day. And so we're discussing this word or. Why does it say the light of the 14th? Which would seem to suggest that we would do b'dikat chametz during the day. Okay, so first we'll explain the Peshat and then we'll go back to the Gemara. In fact, although the word or means light, we saw in Aramaic the word urta, a cognate word, definitely means night. Probably comes from something like twilight, like we say in English. So the beginning of the night when there's still a little bit of light left. So or therefore is a nice way, euphemistic way of talking about the nighttime. So why does the Mishnah not be clearer? If it's a halacha book, then it should say clearly leil arba asar, and then everybody would know exactly when it is. I think the answer is it's not just a book of halacha; it's also speaking poetically, and so we can appreciate its poetry and noting first of all that or here parallels the light of the lamp that we are going to use for b'dikat chametz. And in turn, the entire Masechet ends with the words or. If you go look all the way at the end, it's talking about the Seder, the Passover Seder. The Magid ends with a short prayer that says Hashem should redeem us me'afela le'or gadol, that we should be redeemed from darkness to great light. So actually you have a nice envelope from the beginning to the end of light in the beginning and light at the end. I think that there's also, it's not just the words, but also the symbolism. Remember that we are redeemed at night, b'chasi halayla, right? Why is that? Why do we have to leave in the middle of the night and not during the day? I think it's the idea is that even in a time of great darkness, when things look hopeless, the Geulah can come all of a sudden, even in the middle of the night, like a candle at night. So when we do b'dikat chametz, we're not simply doing something practical of looking for chametz, but we are actually reenacting that light that all of a sudden appears when it's dark out, and so that gets us into the mode and into the mood of Pesach and redemption. We are in Kislev, so actually reminds me a lot of Chanukah, which is also the darkest time of the year, and we light lights in the middle. Josephus says that's why we call it Chag HaUrim, the holiday of lights. So there's a connection there between Chanukah and Pesach. Okay, good. So that's in fact why it starts off or is not only a halachic text, but also is teaching us, it wants to speak nicely, but also teaching us a lot about the theme of light at a time of darkness. Okay, good. So the Gemara jumps right into this question and cites two opinions. Rav Huna that says or means morning or daytime. So you do b'dikat chametz, I guess, in the morning. And Rav Yehuda says it means twilight, nighttime. You do b'dikat chametz at night. And so yesterday we saw 7 challenges to the idea that it means nighttime. We tried to prove again and again that or means morning. Actually, 3 proofs that it means morning, 1 proof that it means nighttime, and 3 more proofs that it means daytime. But none of these proofs were conclusive. We saw each time that the word or means light, but just like in English, the word light doesn't mean morning, so too in biblical Hebrew, the word or simply means light, but not daytime. A lot of these proofs relied on Agadah and showed that or is referring not to the light of day, but rather to Olam Haba, to the light of redemption. And I think those Agadot are also on purpose, because you could have answered them in a more simple way, but I think it's highlighting the idea of or as redemption and or of Olam Haba. They're not simply proofs, but they're adding to the theme. So it's very sophisticated themes running throughout here. And finally, we get to 7 proofs that are from Tannaitic sources. So we had 3 based on that it means nighttime. We saw all three of them. The last one had to do with the torches, that when to announce Rosh Chodesh, and you could only have a torch at night. You could only see it at night, except in the Tolkien, but except in Lord of the Rings. Okay, so that was the last proof that we ended up on, and so now we're going to start off with this one proof from the Kohen who stays up all night. Okay, so we begin Metive. Haya omed kol halayla umakriv al hamizbeach laora taun kiddush yadayim v'raglayim divrei Rabbi. And we answer ora shane. So this is actually the one proof in the middle that shows that it looks like the word or means daytime. How so? Well, if the Kohen was up all night and he was putting the pieces of the animal sacrifice on the Mizbeach, that's what would happen all night. That's why we say arbit. So in the morning, he was up all night, he still has to wash his hands and feet because he has to get ready. Even though he was up all night and he did not become tameh, this is similar when we stay up all night like Shavuot, you still do netilat yadayim, although without a beracha, so he still has to stay up. So you see the word ora is the word used to mean morning. So there you go. See, ora does mean morning. And this is the opposite of everything that we've said so far. We answer the word ora is different from or, right? Ora might mean morning, but that's a different word. It's a different form of the word. It doesn't matter to us because our Mishnah says or la'arba asar. Okay, good. So now back to the regular proofs. This is the only named opinion here, the only named proof. The rest are all anonymous. Metibe mor zutra hamapelet or lishmonim ve'achad bet shamai potrin mikorban ubet hillel mechayevin. Okay, slightly complicated case. If a woman gives birth to a girl, then she is tameh for 14 days. And then she has another 66 days after that, in which even if she sees blood, she's called tahor. So 14 plus 66 is 80 altogether. After that period of 80 days, then she brings a korban. Okay, good. So she brings a korban, whether she gave birth or she miscarried. 80 days later, after a girl, she brings a korban. The question is, what if she miscarries and then she gets pregnant again and miscarries the second time within 80 days? So there everyone agrees she brings one korban for both miscarriages. Okay, so everybody agrees to that. The question here is, and everybody agrees that if she miscarried and then 80 days later, she brings a korban. And then later on, a few days after that, she miscarries again, she brings another korban. The question here is, what if it's right on the borderline? She miscarries the second time, or lishmonim yom, which means here, obviously, the night of the 80th day. So Bet Shammai says, don't have to bring korban, even though it's the 81st day at night and just after the cutoff point, right? It's after Seta Kochavim. Doesn't matter, only one korban for both. And Bet Hillel says, the chayav, this is after the cutoff point. This is after the 80 days. So she has to bring a second korban. Now that Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in Keretot, continues and says, Amru lahen Bet Hillel Bet Shammai, Ma'ishna or shemonim ve'achad miyom shemonim ve'achad. Says, what's the difference between, he uses the word or, which has to mean here the night of the 81st, from the following day of the 81st. Im shiva lo la tum'ah, lo yishve lo la korban. Isn't it the same regarding tum'ah? In other words, if she sees blood on the 81st at night, or she sees blood on the 81st the next day, she's going to become tameh. Everyone agrees with that. Even Bet Shammai would agree with that. So therefore, since you don't make a distinction regarding tum'ah, you should not make a distinction regarding if she has a second miscarriage at night. It should be past the cutoff point. Okay, that's the end of the quote from the Mishnah. And now we analyze. M'dekamar Bet Hillel Bet Shammai, Ma'ishna or shemonim ve'achad, miyom shemonim ve'achad, shema mina or urtahu shema mina. So since he says the word or to refer to the nighttime, because then he says the day after, obviously he's talking about the night. This is a conclusive proof. Okay, good. And now, even though we have many conclusive proofs already, right? We want to make a beautiful structure. I'll show you the full structure in a few minutes. Metive yachol yehen echal or shelishi. So another objection to the one who says it means daytime. The word or means daytime. So here we're talking about a korban todah. Korban Todah, you're allowed to eat. The Kohen has this part, but you, as the owner, you're allowed to eat most of it. It's like a big barbecue. You invite all your friends and family, and you're allowed to eat it the day that you sacrifice, that night, and the next day. So 2 days and 1 night. Now the Baraita asks, can it be eaten or lishlishi? In other words, the night of the third day, right? The night after the first night that you eat it. So we try to prove yes. Vedinhu zevachim nechalim liyom echad. A regular zevach like a korban chatat is usually eaten for 1 day. Ushlamim nechalim l'shnei yamim, whereas shalamim, a korban todah, is for 2 days. Now with the korban chatat, malahalan laila achad hayom, afkan laila achad hayom. Or korban chatat can be in the day you sacrifice it and the next night. So too, a korban todah, which you have longer, should also be the night, the day, the night, the day, and then it should end the following night. So doesn't it make sense from a kal vachomer they should be able to eat it the next night? Talmud Omar beyom zibchachem yachel umimachorat v'hanotad ad yom be'od yom hu ne'echal ve'no ne'echal le'or shilishi. So the pshat of the pasuk is simple. It says you eat it that day and the next day, and whatever left over after that you have to burn. But Gemara is not reading the pshat; it's cutting it short and reading ad yom as if it says od yom. In other words, while it's still day, you can eat it, and you cannot eat it le'or shilishi. Obviously, here the word or means the night after. So there you go. That's the proof. But we're going to continue and read the whole Beraita, even though it's not relevant. Yachol yisaref miyad. When do you burn it? Can it be that you burn it immediately after you have to stop eating it? So you stop eating at sunset. So would you burn it the night? Vedinhu zevachim nechalim liyom belayla ushlamim nechalim l'shnei yamim velayla echad. Malahlan techef lachila serefa afkan techef lachila serefa. So you might think also a kal vachomer korban chatat, which is a shorter time. So you eat it the day and then the night, and you have to burn it immediately. So then korban todah, which you have longer to eat, so maybe you should all the more so there's more pressure to burn it immediately. So does that mean you burn it at night, right after the cutoff point? That's why it says bayom, on the day of the third day you burn it. Bayom atasoref v'atasoref for balayla. We don't burn these kodashim at night. We only burn them in the morning. Okay, that's the end of the Beraita. The proof is from this. Midekamar yehen echal or lashilishi al maor urtahu shema mina. Since the Beraita started, wondering, can you eat it the third night? The third night. So and use the words or. Therefore, or means night, and so that is another conclusive proof. Okay, good. So we have a lot of fantastic proofs. So far, all of them were introduced by the word metibeh, and now the last two are introduced by the words tashema. This is quite interesting. Let me just talk about this for a second, because if you look in the manuscript, this is always fun to do. This is a Yemenite manuscript. It's the most accurate a version of the text. The Yemenites were very careful in copying, even after printing was around and they had the printed versions, they still were copying their own ancient versions. And so if you look here, this is where we started today. And you see, instead of metibeh, it says tashema. And the next one also tashema. Here also tashema, tashema. In other words, for all except for this one, motiv marzutra. By the way, we have metiveh, which doesn't make sense because metiveh is plural and marzutra is only a single person. So it should be motiv marzutra, and then it goes for more tashemas. In other words, you see the structure very clearly in the Yemenite manuscript, that we have 7 challenges with the word metiveh, and those are all from Pesukim, 3, 1, and 3. 3 for daytime, 1 for nighttime, 3 for daytime. And then we're going to have the following from Tannaitic sources, which are almost all based on Tashema, except for the one from Marzutra. Okay, what's the difference between the word metiveh and Tashema? There's a lot of overlap between the two, except that metiveh is always a challenge from a source that's a higher authority, a challenge to an amorah from a pasuk or a baraita. The word tashema, however, is more versatile. It can be a challenge or it can be a proof, a support. And so I think in this case, it uses the tashema second because these are not so much arguments against daytime as much as proofs for it being nighttime. Okay, there's also another rule that generally you start with metiveh and then you continue with tashema. You don't start off right away with tashema. So it really makes sense as perfectly. It could be that the earliest layer of this baraita, of this sugya, is Marzutra, who's the only named person. And then all the other ones are added on, layered after that. And so it makes sense for him to be the one that says metiveh, because he's a named person, and maybe originally he was the only source here, and everything else was added after. But what you end up having is 313, and then another 313. Although here the point of the proofs is to show that in the Torah, in Tanakh, the word or never means daytime, it just means light. And so kind of put that on the side. And then in the Lashon Chachamim, in Mishneh Hebrew, it does mean nighttime. And just one little proof in the middle, the opposite, that's rejected. But we have 5 proofs, and yet one more that we're going to add. Okay, so I'll show you why. There's actually 15 altogether. And so I know I want to be 7 and 7, but what's this last one doing here? Okay, let me show you those last 2, and then I'll come back to the chart. Tashema. Or shel Yom Kippurim mitpalel sheva umitvadeh. Okay, it's talking about all the amidas that we say on Yom Kippur. And so it starts off with or the shel Yom Kippurim. Obviously, this means the nighttime of Yom Kippur, arbit. You say 7 berachot. The first 3 and the last 3 are always the same. And the middle one would be special for Yom Kippur. And you also mitvadeh, you also say al chet at the end of the amidah. And then shacharit, same thing, mitpalel sheva umitvadeh, b'musaf mitpalel sheva umitvadeh, b'mincha mitpalel sheva umitvadeh. We're missing ne'ilah here. I think it's in other versions it does appear. Okay, but anyway, ba'arvit mitpalel me'ayin shemona asar. And then Yom Kippur, when Yom Kippur is over, you say me'en shemona esrei, which means this is the bracha called havinenu. It's in the back of some sidurim. It's a short, instead of saying all 18 berachot, in other words, all 12 in the middle, there's one paragraph that summarizes all of the middle berachot. And it's you're allowed to say it when you're in a rush, on the go. You say that summary of all of them. So why do we say that on Yom Kippur evening? Well, obviously, everybody is hungry. They want to rush home. We have a custom in most of our Beit Knesset to end arbit when the fast is over. But most places in the world don't do that. And so everyone wants to go. And it's hard for them to concentrate for a full Amidah at the end of Yom Kippur. So they would say the short version, Havinenu, according to Tanakh Kama. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel omer mishum avotav mitpalel shemona asar shelemot mipnei shesarich lomar havdalah bechonen hada'at. So he says, no, you have to say the full Amidah for Arbit because you have to add Atachonantanu, and you can't add Atachonantanu when you're saying Havinenu. So therefore you say the full one. Anyway, that the point for us is Alma or Urtaho. You see, it starts off with Or Yom Kippurim, and that's obviously talking about Arbit before Shacharit. Shema Mina, good, that's a good proof. And the last one, Tashema, the Taner Be Shemuel, Lele Arba'a Asar, Bodkin et HaChames, Leor Haner. Alma or urtahu. Okay, so this is a braita that's parallel to our Mishnah. It's the exact same words, except it's clearer. Instead of saying or l'arba asar, it says lele arba asar. So this is clear beyond any proof that the word or means laila. Okay, so I know you're wondering, you could have brought this to begin with, right? This is like a simple, straightforward. Yeah, we could have, but then we wouldn't have had all the fun that we just did. Okay, so therefore this is the final proof, and now since it's conclusive, now we have to go back to those original 2 opinions. Ela ben Rav Huna ben Rav Yehuda tekula alma or urtahu. In fact, everyone agrees that it does mean, or it means nighttime. You do b'dikat chametz at night. V'la pelige mor ki atre u mor ki atre. Be'atre de Rav Huna karu nahaket. When they were speaking, they weren't arguing. They were just using their different dialects, each one according to his place. Rav Huna, who lived in Surah, they said the word naghe. And there, the Aramaic word naghe meant nighttime. So that's why he used that word. And in the place of Rav Yehuda, they didn't use the word that way. They would say lele. And so they said their interpretations of the Mishnah independently. It's only the Gemara later on that they were put together, and then it looks like they have a machloket between them. But in fact, they agree. Right? Rav Yehuda was from Pumbedita, so that's a different place, and that's why it's there. Okay, so how come our Mishnah, they didn't put a nice word, put a simple word of Laila and make it clear? The answer is Lishna Malya Hudanakat. I wanted to say in a nice way. It's nicer to talk about the word Od than to start off with the word Laila. That's a kind of a dark place to start. Okay, I'll continue in a second, but let's just summarize what we have in terms of the structure. So what I'm about to show you is actually based on a professor I studied with in Hebrew University, David Rosenthal, who wrote his dissertation on Mesachet Pesachim, and he shows that there's actually two different versions in manuscripts. The common one that's found in printed editions and most manuscripts, and the other one, which is found in the Yemenite manuscripts and also Rabbeinu Hananel whenever he quotes it. So that's how we know this is ancient and superior. So you see in the regular version that you'll find in most printed editions, you have 15 proofs, and they all start with metive, except for the last two have tashema. Okay. However, in the Yemenite version, which I just showed you, it has 7, which are motive, and those are all based on pesukim. And then it has tashema for the rest of them, except for the Marzutra one, which I explained why. And so that would be another 8. Okay, good. So now back to the structure. How come there's 7 and 8 and not 7 and 7? Okay, we'll have an answer, which is that the last proof does not actually mention the word or. It's just a parallel to our Mishnah that says the word laila, leil arba asar. So therefore, this is 7 proofs and 7 proofs that all talk about the word or and try to prove that the word or means night. So therefore, that's why it's 7 and 7. The last one stands on its own. It's actually, it's a direct proof about the meaning of the Mishnah, not about the dictionary definition of the word or. And so I think that's why it's separate. Okay, one last point that someone just posted today in the name of Rav Yehuda Shaviv, one of my teachers in Gush Etzion, who said as follows: why does it have so many proofs? Why 7 and 7? Altogether 14 proofs? Well, it's Od le'arba asar. So Od of 14. So there you go, 14 proofs. And if you're wondering about the last one, continue reading. Od le'arba asar bodkin, right? Et hachames le'od haner. So you have one more Od at the end of the phrase, and that would be the last one. Okay, so this is very beautiful, and especially at the beginning of Masechet, this would be common to have a poetic opening to get us into the mood, into the theme. All right, so now we completed that, and we go to the second topic of the page, which is about speaking nicely in general, always saying things in a polite way and not in a negative way. So we're going to see a whole bunch of proofs and stories about that. Okay, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Damar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Leolam, Al Yosi Adam Davar Migone Mipiv, Shere Rikem HaKatuv Shemone Otiot, Velo Hotzi Davar Migone Mipiv, Shene'emar, Min HaBehema Tehora, O Min HaBehema Asher Enena Tehora. So the Mishnah is teaching us a good practice to always speak in a positive way, and don't let any crude words exit your mouth. And we learn this from the Pasuk in Bereshit, when Hashem is telling Noach to take the various animals into the teva, and he says you should take the tahor animals, 7 of each. So how does he say it? Min habehema tehora, the pure animals, you take those, and also min habehema asher enena tehora, from the animals that are not pure. Now you could have said it much more simply by saying min habehema hatemea, right? And that would have been just 4 letters. Which would have been more precise, 5 letters, ha-teme'ah, 5 letters. Instead, it says, or this whole phrase, Umina be'ema asher enena tehora, which is 13 letters. And so therefore, you see that the pasuk went out of its way to add 8 extra letters just to say something in a nice way. Okay, if you're counting, Humina be'ema asher enena tehora, in printed editions of Talmud, it's written with a vav, maleh, and so then it works. In the Masoretic text, this is spelled chaser, so it ends up only being 12 altogether. In other words, not 8, but 7 extra letters. Okay, but you get the point either way. Rav Papa Amar Tesha. No, is adding. Each one's adding, upping the ante. I have a place where the pasuk adds 9 letters in order and goes out of its way to say something in a nice way. Shneimar ki becha ish asher lo yeh tahor mikere laila. In Devarim says someone who's tahor, who is not tahor, has to go out of the camp. So you could have just said ish tameh. You could have said 3 letters. Instead, it says a person who is not tahor because he had something happen to him at night. Or that's a very long phrase. That's 12 letters instead. That's 9 extra. Good. Ravina Amad, I said vav de tahor. This is actually, you can add another one because the word asher lo yeh tahor, in his Ravina had it spelled maleh. So he says this actually could be 10, whereas Rav Papa had it spelled chaser, so he only had 9. Okay, so you see that even the Amoraim themselves, some had maleh and some had chaser, different spellings. Okay, Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, Shesh Asre Shneimar Ki Amar Mikrehu Bilti Tahor Hu Ki Lo Tahor. This is when Shaul was wondering where David is. He didn't show up for the party, and Natan says, something happened to him. He's not Tahor because he's not Tahor. Okay, he could, instead of all that, he could have just said he's Tameh. And that would have been just 3 letters. Instead, it says this whole phrase, which is 19 letters. So you see, it added 16 extra letters to say something nice. You don't want to say, especially there, he's saying something about an actual person. David, you want to say he's Tameh. You say he's not Tahor. It's much better. Okay, good. Now, another proof. Tanya deber bishmel. Le'olam yisper adam belashon nikiya. Shere bezav kera'o merkav, ubisha kera'o moshav. ואומר, ותבחר לשון ארומים, ואומר, ודעת שפתי ברור מלelu. Okay, should always speak in a nice way, because even the Torah was talking about zav and zava. Those are both equal levels of tum'ah, both a man and a woman who have irregular emissions. So because they have a high level of tum'ah, anything they sit on becomes tameh. Even if they're not touching it, even something, 3 layers under, becomes tameh. But regarding the male zav, it says merkav, whatever he rides on, riding on a horse. But for a woman, it says moshav, whatever she's sitting on. Why? Because it's not modest to speak about a woman riding a horse. Even in those days when the woman would ride a horse, they would ride saddle side so that their legs are together. And so you see how he uses a different language for the sake of modesty of the woman. Good. And furthermore, it brings 2 more pisukim. Now we're going to ask, what are these extra 2 pisukim adding to what the proof is? Mai ve'omer, v'chi tema hanemed b'deoraita v'b'drabanan la, tashema ve'omer v'tibchad lashon arumim. You might think only in the Torah uses nice language, but how about chachamim? Do they also? It says yes, because arumim, that's like chachamim, they choose their language carefully. Good. And you might think only sages speak their words carefully, but how about just regular when you're talking to your friend? Do you still have to say words politely? He says yes. Knowledge of my lips, whatever I'm saying, should be clear, and I choose them in a careful way. Good. Now we're going to challenge that thing about riding on an animal. Is that true that we never see women riding animals? Right, when Rivka goes to meet Yitzchak, she rides on the horse. She doesn't sit on the camel, she rides on the camel. So what about that? Well, camels are really scary. They're very tall, they're very high. And so if you're going to sit on the camel saddle side, you might fall off. So there, everybody knows that's the regular way. Even women would ride on camels in regular stance. Actually, with Rivka, she fell off the camel anyway, right? When she saw Yitzchak. Okay, so all the more so if she wasn't properly sitting on it. All right, so that's good. But another proof. Al hachamor. So Moshe takes his wife and his children and vayerkibem. They ride, and this time it's a donkey, not a camel. Hatam mishum banav urchahu. No, there it's talking about he took his wife and his children. So it's talking about his children. His children rode, but it doesn't say that his wife explicitly rode in a regular way. It's, presumably she rode saddle side. Another challenge is Abigail. When she's trying to protect her husband, she rides down the mountain to David HaMelech to plead on his behalf, and says, so she's riding, she's by herself, and it's a donkey, and still says Rochevet, not Yoshevet. So we have three answers. Hatam mishum bi atuta de lelia. Well, she's riding at night. Night is very scary, so she's got to make sure she has a good grip. Or even if you think she's not scared of the night, she'll be scared of meeting the king. She's all nervous, so she's got to be steady. She's got to be riding in the regular way. And if you say she's not scared of the king, she's riding down a mountain. That's really unsteady, so she'd have to hold on tight. So that's why that case is an exception. But otherwise, women would generally not ride an animal in such a way. Okay, now we'll go back to the Torah. We said before that the Torah will add letters not to say something that is improper. Hold on, is that true? Does it not say the word tameh every time? Does it always say enot tahor? Certainly, we say many times it says the word tameh throughout the Torah. So what's going on? If it's equal length, so it will say the nice one. But if it's going to have to add more letters, more words, then the Torah wants to be concise. This is another principle. One principle is speak politely. The other principle is to always speak concisely. You don't have to say it again and again. To always speak concisely. You get my point? Okay, so therefore the Torah is also going to shorten. You should always teach your students in a concise manner. I like this because the introduction to the statement is longer than the statement itself, right? We have two versions of who said it and who said it, all that. Okay, but I guess that's the essential part. You have to quote it in the proper name. Okay, if it's concise, then they'll remember it better and their minds won't wander. Wait, is that even true? Anytime it's equal length that they use the nicer language. Remember just now by Abigail, it says she was rochevet, but the word rochevet is the same number of letters as yoshevet. So it could have equally said she was yoshevet and said it in a nice way. But kama rochevet, the answer is rochevet ketiv. Actually, it says rochevet chaser without a vav. So you see, it's only 4 letters. Technically, you could write yoshevet also without a vav, but maybe it's not as common to write yoshevet chaser. It's harder to read than rochevet chaser. Okay, so we answered that. All right, good. And now we're going to end off with a series of stories where students either did or did not speak nicely and what happened to them. Hanhu tere tamideh dahu yatveh kameh derav. Chad amar shavitinan haishma'ata kedavar acher mesankan. V'chad amar shavitinan haishma'ata kigdi mesankan. Okay, after these two students, they were studying with Rav, their teacher. It was a long, complex issue. And so afterwards, one of the students said, you made us as tired as that other thing. By other thing, he means a pig. In other words, he said, right, I feel like a tired pig after learning all this. The other one said, oh, you've tired us out. I feel like a tired goat. Okay, a tired goat is not so bad to say. To tell your teacher, I feel like a tired pig, right? That's not a nice thing to say. And so Rav would not speak to the one who said, who compared his learning, his tiredness to a pig. Even though he didn't actually say the word pig, he said another thing, that which shall not be named, right? Still, even as a euphemism, it's to compare yourself to that is not nice. And so Rav wouldn't speak to him. Good. Next story. Anu teret talmideh tavu yatveh kamedi Hillel. V'chad minayu Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Amri la kamedi Rabbi. V'chad minayu Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, this is a student-teacher story. We're not sure who the teacher and who the student was. It could be that the teacher was Hillel, and the student was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. That's very early generation. Or it could be a later generation, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the 5th generation Tana, and Rabbi Yochanan, the 1st, 2nd generation Amora. Anyway, we know the student's name is Rabbi Yochanan. We just don't know which one it is, but it doesn't matter. Chad Amad, and we don't know the name of the other student in either case. You'll see why. Chad Amad mipnei ma bosrin betahara ve'en moskin betahara. The question was, how come when we harvest grapes, we have to make sure that we are ritually pure? We go to mikveh and all that so that the grapes don't get tameh. But when we harvest olives, we're not careful that we are tahor. The other one asks the same question, but in different words. How come we harvest grapes in purity, but we harvest olives with impurity? So you see, the second student did not use polite language. So the teacher, whoever it was, says, I am sure that the first student will be a great teacher in Israel. And sure enough, a short time later, either Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai or Rabbi Yochanan did in fact become great teachers. So you see, they were careful with their language, and that's why they became great teachers. Okay, Hanu telata kahaneh. Another story, this must be an old story in times of the Bet HaMikdash. There were 3 Kohanim, and they were dividing up the lechem hapanim, the bread that they give out every week to the Kohanim. If there's a lot of Kohanim, then they have to divide it into small pieces. Each Kohen might only get a small piece. So they had a rule: you get what you get, and don't get upset. So they're all comparing how much bread they got. He says, I got a full, just 1 bean's worth. I got an olive's worth. I got the size of a lizard's tail. Why a lizard's tail? If you go and catch a lizard, right? What happens? The tail falls off. And so all you have is a small tail instead of the whole thing. So that's not a nice way. You can compare the lechem hapanim, this holy bread, to it's okay to compare it to a bean or an olive, but not to a lizard. So then they checked out this Kohen, and they found that he had bad lineage. Somewhere before his father or grandfather was a halal, right? And see, that's why he speaks in such a disrespectful way. Okay, question on the story. We have a rule that once someone enters the Bet HaMikdash and is allowed to serve in the Mizbeach, means we checked him out already. So once he's checked out, he has a certificate. You don't check him out again. So why are they checking him out again to see if he's pasul? He already passed the test. Don't say that he had a disqualification because of lineage, but rather shachatz. He has arrogance. He was too arrogant, and so they said you can't be a kohen with that kind of attitude. Or maybe that's a different case, because he outed himself by saying such a bad word. He's like, okay, we got to recheck your paperwork to see if you're really worthy. All right, just a couple more stories. There was this Aramean, non-Jew, and he would go go up to Jerusalem and take part of and eat the Pesach. He'd make believe he's Jewish, and he'd get to eat the meat. Amar ketiv kol benecha lo yochal bo. So he would go and boast about it to people and say, see, I'm arel, I'm a goy, I'm nochri, and I go and I eat the best parts of the meat. See, I know how to game the system. So one time he was saying that in front of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, who lived in Bavel. He says, a trick question. Did they give you the fat of the tail? Right? The very fancy part, the fat of the tail. Amar le'la, no, they never gave that to me. So and now he has to go ask for that. What he didn't know is that the fat of the tail is you're not allowed to eat. That goes on the mizbeach, right? That goes to the kohanim. It's prohibited for anyone, even a Jew, to eat it. So next time he went up, he says, "Give me the fat of the tail." And right. So he said you should do that. So next time he went, he didn't say, he said that. Says, what are you talking about? The fat tail goes up to God. There's a play on words of salik. He goes up, makes aliyah, and this fat of the tail also goes up. You can't have that. Where'd you get this idea? Who mentioned that? How would you know to ask for that? He told me, he suggested it to me. Why would Biuda ben Betara tell you to ask for something that you're not allowed to eat? He must be hinting to us something. In other words, this guy was his own messenger for destruction. So they checked him out. They found out he was an Aramean. They killed him. Okay, poor guy. Well, that does say you get karet, anyone who's not worthy to eat Pesach. So that was his fate. שלחו לרבי יהודה בן בתרה, שלם לך רבי יהודה בן בתרה, דאח בדת בן סיבין, ומסודתך פרוסה בירושלים. Says, how amazing are you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara, that although you're all the way in Nitzivin, so far away on the other side of the Euphrates, but yet your net is spread all the way to Jerusalem. You can control everything, and you know how to speak wisely, and you got this guy to self-incriminate. Okay, Misuda, by the way, is another key word in the movie Footnote. If you haven't watched that, you'll probably enjoy it. Okay, Rav Kahana, Halash, there's two more stories. One time Rav Kahana became weak, he was ill. Shdaru Rabbanan Rabbi Yoshua Bereh Rabbi Idi. So I sent this to Rabbi Yoshua, go check on him, tell us how he's feeling. אמרו לה, זיל בדוק מדינא, אתה אשכחה תנח נפשי. He got there, he saw Rav Kahana died. So when you see someone die, if you're present, he tears his clothes, maybe it was his teacher too. But he turned his shirt around so that people wouldn't see that he did so. And he came back to the other sages crying. So they saw him crying. They said, what happened? Did he die? Malehu ana la kaimna umasidi ba hu chesil. Says, I didn't say it, you guys said it, right? In other words, he wanted to break the news softly, indirectly, that they should figure it out for themselves. So that's why he tore his shirt, because he had to be put on the other side so they wouldn't see, and so they only get a hint of it. It's not slander, but it's a negative thing. You shouldn't say a negative thing directly, and they were able to figure it out. So there you go. That's a good example of using words nicely. And finally, Yohanan Hakuka'a, that's his name, Nefak Likidiyata. Ki'ata amru le chaitin na'asu yafot. Okay, so one time he went to the village and they asked him, as you were just in the fields, tell us, how's the wheat doing? How's the wheat crop doing this year? Amar lahem se'orim na'asu yafot. He says, the barley is good. Okay, in other words, the wheat is terrible. Oh, the wheat's good. Go and announce that to the horses and to the donkeys and to the mules. In other words, barley bread back then, now you pay extra for multigrain. But back then, wheat bread was for humans, barley was for animals. So as it says in the Pasuk in Melachim. So he says, you're telling us the barley is good? That's not good news. Go and tell the animals that there's good barley for them that is coming here. So they were criticizing him for telling them such bad news. Well, poor guy, I think he was trying. He didn't come back and say the wheat is terrible. What should he have said? He should have said, last year there was a lot of good wheat. And they would have figured out, okay, last year, but not this year. I don't know if that really would have made them feel better. Or tell them the lentils are really fine lentils this year. Okay, so they'll know, they'll get the hint that the wheat is bad. At least they can look forward to some good adeh soup, to having some good lentils. All right, so we'll end on that positive note. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen v'amen.